And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Thursday, March 6th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all of that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk about a couple things regarding the Seattle Seahawks. With their wide receivers, actually, more specifically. DK Metcalf requested a trade, and they also released longtime wide receiver Tyler Lockett. So that's big news. It looks like it's going to be an end of an era in Seattle, and we'll talk about where DK could end up, where Tyler Lockett could end up. We'll get into all that. In the second part of the show, we will touch upon LeBron James getting to 50,000, and if any other player could possibly get to that and break his record, whatever it finishes at, which I think most of us will probably be in agreement on what the answer is. We'll also talk about, there was a handful of moves with defensive players. We'll talk about Maxx Crosby getting a new deal with the Raiders, Zach Bond re-signing with the Eagles, and we'll get into some of the other moves as well. We'll talk about what teams that made the postseason last year in baseball will miss the playoffs this year. Who has the possibility of doing that? And then in the final part of the show, I will continue my season overviews, and today we will be touching upon the Chicago Bears. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the Seahawks and some of the changes that are coming regarding their wide receiver room. So DK Metcalf, has kind of been in the news in terms of, just trade rumors. But it was made official yesterday when he requested a trade. And he will be going elsewhere at some point. It's definitely different than, what's going on with Cleveland and Myles Garrett, because Cleveland does not want to trade Myles Garrett, but the Seahawks will trade DK Metcalf. And there's plenty of teams out there that need wide receivers. I mean, how many times am I going to say it? DK has been a productive receiver in this league for a long time. And, I think a change of scenery will do well for him. He's coming off of a year where he really didn't get into the end zone that much. Geno Smith has done a good job as the quarterback, but I think DK Metcalf wants an upgrade there as well. And looking at, his statistics from last year, 66 receptions on the season. He just missed 1,000 yards, but he only had 5 touchdowns. And you go back to his previous seasons, he had 7 touchdowns his rookie season, 10 touchdowns in 2020, 12 in 2021. But then he had 6 in 2022, 8 in 2023, and then 5, like I said. And he's had 1,000 yards in half of his seasons. His best season, it was between 2020 and 2021. And he had 1,300 yards in 2020. Like I said, with 10 touchdowns, he had 83 receptions. In 2022, he had 90 receptions. This is Geno's, first full year being the starter for the Seahawks. But there's going to be teams lining up to get DK Metcalf. And, right now, he is, I think he's 27, I want to say. So, and he's a big target. And, you hear the Chargers, they're a team that's, looking for wide receivers. And, the Packers, I know that there's been trade rumors regarding them. Yeah, so DK is 27 years old. But I think he would want to go, I would imagine he wants to go to a contender, but maybe he has no say in it. I think, the Raiders could be a possibility because of Pete Carroll. I think when you look at both of these guys, you think of Pete Carroll and the Raiders. And the Raiders' need for wide receivers. I think Tyler Lockett, if he wants to continue playing, maybe the Raiders could bring him in on a cheap deal. But yeah, that's one big need for the Raiders right now is wide receiver. And we'll get to them in a little bit. And then looking at Tyler Lockett, he's on the older side. He's in his 30s right now. And, DK Metcalf is more football ahead of him. But, yeah, Lockett's coming off of a year where he had 600 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. And, they had some good years in Seattle. But, now we're entering a new era with, Mike McDonald as the head coach. And they want to go in a different direction. So, yeah, Lockett is 32. And, yeah, even when looking on the Sleeper app, it says that, he could go to Vegas and reunite with Pete Carroll. Because Pete Carroll is definitely going to want to bring in guys, to help change the culture. And Tyler Lockett's best season, he had a good stretch from 2019 to 2022. 8 touchdowns in 2019, 10 in 2020, 8 in 2021, 9 in 2022. He also had 10 in 2018. He had 965 yards receiving. Because he really became that top option. And he's been durable for most of his career. In the beginning of part of his career, that was when he was still kind of, new to everything. He was a young player, and, they had other options. He was kind of the special teams guy. But he's been durable in his career. He really has not missed any games. But that's also because of how he plays the game, and he'll make a catch, he'll fall to the ground. He won't take hits. So, I think he'd be a good veteran presence if, the Raiders were to bring him in. So, yeah, no, but now this kind of paves the way for Jackson Smith-Njigba to be the guy in Seattle. And he's coming off of his best season. And he, now we're going to get to see what he does as a number 1 wide receiver. I'm curious to see what ends up happening with the quarterback position. How are they going to approach this draft? Are they going to draft a quarterback? I think you'd have to guess they would at some point. Maybe they trade up in the draft. Maybe there's somebody they like that they trade up and get. Because Geno Smith is not the answer. He's not the long-term answer. And Geno's done fine, like I said before, but they need to find their franchise quarterback. And this is big news. So we'll see what happens. Again, there's plenty of teams out there that need receivers. And who knows, maybe they both go to Vegas, they bring Russell Wilson in, and then all of a sudden you got the Seahawks, the Las Vegas edition. That's what everybody's going to say. When you see that, there's Seahawks players that are available, you're automatically going to think that they're going to go to where Pete Carroll is. They're going to go to Vegas. But it makes sense. The Raiders have a need at quarterback, and they have a need at wide receiver. And, you got Russell Wilson available. You got Tyler Lockett now available. DK Metcalf requested a trade. So, who knows? Maybe they all reunite in Vegas. Maybe they get Bobby Wagner from Washington. He comes over to Vegas. And then you go from there. But we will see what happens. But there were a lot of moves yesterday, and we'll get into them later in the show with contracts and players got released. So, next week, that's when everything gets crazy with free agency. So, also other receiver news, Christian Kirk got released as well from the Jaguars. So, he's available, and we'll see where he could potentially end up. Maybe he goes back to the Cardinals. We'll see. But let me know what you guys think, though, about DK Metcalf requesting a trade and Tyler Lockett being released. Where do you think they potentially end up? Let me know in the comments. Curious to see where DK ends up. That's another big-name wide receiver on the market, on the trade market at least. You got him, T. Higgins, if he eventually, maybe he doesn't work out a long-term deal and he could be dealt. Devontae Adams is available. Chris Godwin's available. There's some big names out there. And we're going to see a shift in receivers. We just saw Deebo Samuel get moved. And it was only for a 5th-round pick. I would imagine for DK Metcalf, who's 27, you're going to see better compensation coming back to the Seahawks in a DK trade. But we'll see what happens. We will find out in the coming weeks. But we are going to take our first break now. And then when we come back, we will talk about LeBron James getting to 50,000 points the other night. And we'll talk about whether or not a player could ever break his record. And, we'll get into, the active players, who's the next closest to 50,000. We'll take a look at all that when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about LeBron James officially getting to 50,000, and if any player will ever beat his record. Now, LeBron's still playing. He's going 50,000 and more, and we'll see where he eventually ends up. Now, this is with the postseason and the regular season combined, because right now he's over 40,000 in regular season points, and then he has over 8,000 in, he's like 41,000 and then over 8,000 in playoff games, but he's been playing for such a long time. He came straight out of high school, and, we've talked about this, and he's talked about it, that, he's nearing the end, and we don't know when exactly he's going to call it a career. But I did think about this. If the Lakers go on a run with Luka, would he feel rejuvenated? Like, hey, I get to play next to one of the best rising stars in basketball, one of the stars of this next era. Wouldn't you want to continue to play? I don't know. That's just one thing that came to mind. But also, you could, on the other hand, say, well, it's easier now for LeBron to leave because he could just hand it off to Luka, and then this becomes Luka's team. Still can't believe that trade happened. but here we are. And you wonder how many points LeBron will finish with. And, you know, you hear across media how he's doing this for such a long period of time, and how he's been great over a long stretch of time, that, you know, when you compare it to Michael Jordan, which is what everybody does, Michael Jordan wasn't great for this long, because Michael Jordan retired in the middle of his career to pursue other things, and then he came back. You know, it really is amazing what LeBron is doing right now. Now, I'm not going to have a GOAT debate when it comes to basketball. See, football's a little different, because I was able to watch Tom Brady for a long period of time. And that's who everyone said, that's who everybody points to and says that's the greatest of all time. And then when you compare it to Patrick Mahomes, I've, you know, been watching Patrick Mahomes since he came to the league. But when it comes to the GOAT debate in basketball, it's a whole different story. Did not see a single play from Michael Jordan's career. That was before my time. You know, I really started getting into basketball around the time LeBron went to the Heat. So that was a big deal back in the day. It was such a big deal that we had a televised event for his announcement, or his decision, sorry, because that's what it was called, the decision, what team he was going to end up on. But yeah, LeBron right now, he's the best basketball player that most of us have ever seen. And, you know, and you wonder, you know, making it to the postseason, how much he's going to add to that playoff resume, and, you know, what kind of run the Lakers could go on. Now, I do have the active scorers in the regular season. So LeBron's obviously at the top. And I don't know if this is exactly updated. This is on Basketball Reference. I don't know if this is updated from, you know, the last couple of days. But Kevin Durant is second behind LeBron. This is just in regular season points. Durant's at 30,000. James Harden's at 27,000. Russell Westbrook's at 25,000. Steph Curry is at 24,000. DeMar DeRozan's at 24. Chris Paul's at 22. Damian Lillard's at 22. Giannis. I don't want to go all the way down, but could a player break LeBron's record? And we talked about this in our production meeting. You would basically have to play every single game, not miss time, and you'd have to average, I forget what the exact number is, but you basically have to average like over 20 points, which, well, yeah, that makes sense. But I think it was like 25 or 26 points a game, something like that, over, you know, a 20-year period. I don't really think anybody's ever breaking this record. And LeBron's still going. It really depends on how long LeBron decides to play. Now, he could play 1 or 2 more years, or he could keep going. You know, he could keep going till the wheels fall off, which I don't think he will. I think he's going to want to retire while he still can play at a high level. You know, I don't think he wants to retire, you know, coming off of a major injury. I don't think he wants that. Because, you know, that's kind of like what happened with, you know, Kobe Bryant. You know, he tore his Achilles. And then I think he played 1 more year after that. You know, you don't want to see that. I mean, Kobe did go out on top. I mean, he scored 60 points in his final game. And, you know, you would have wished the Lakers had done a better job at building a team around him towards the end there, because the Lakers were not good in Kobe's final years. But, you know, with LeBron, it's a different story. And, you know, the Lakers right now in a very good position. Right now they sit at the 2 seed. They're playing good basketball. Luka is settling in, and they play the Knicks tonight, which, this is a good test for the Knicks. They did lose to the Warriors the other night, but this is a marquee matchup with the Knicks coming in. Both teams have about the same record. The Lakers have played one less game. They're 39-21. The Knicks are 40-21. And this is on TNT. I'm looking forward to this game. Definitely going to try to tune in and watch it. But, no, it is incredible what LeBron is doing. I really don't think any player is going to come close to this record. I mean, maybe at some point it happens. I mean, you look at some of the young players, names were thrown around in our production meeting. I mean, Wemby, but now Wemby's hurt. Now, if he comes back next year and, this blood clot thing was a one-off thing, we'll see. Because he looks like he's going to become the face of the NBA. Then there's Luka, but then, the other thing, too, is LeBron takes good care of himself. When you look at some of these other players and what they do, you can't be doing that if you want to, play into your 40s like LeBron is doing right now. It's going to be very tough for someone to come in and try to break this record. Now, I think that, you could see other players potentially get to 50,000. Like Kevin Durant, he's at 30,000 regular season points. It only has the regular season points on Baseball Reference. But actually, let's see. How many points does Durant have? So Durant has around 5,000. So he's currently at, a little over 35,000 points. And right now he is, I think Durant's 35. Oh, he's 36. So, I mean, I think Durant could play. I mean, Durant's had some major injuries too. He had the Achilles, when he ruptured that in the finals against Toronto. He could get to it. I think if he plays into his 40s, I think he could get to 50,000. I think you could see some players get to 50,000. I don't know, but I don't think they're getting past LeBron. And especially because LeBron is way ahead of the pack right now. But we'll see. You never know. But let me know what you guys think, though, about LeBron hitting 50,000. Do you think any NBA prospects, it could be someone that hasn't even been born yet, that could break his record. But we got to see what he finishes out with. We got to emphasize that. Because who knows? He could play for another 50 years and get to 100,000. No, but it really is remarkable what he has done in his career. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, like I said, LeBron's Lakers, they will be playing the Knicks tonight. That's a big game. And then some of the other NBA action as well tonight. You got the Bulls and the Magic. You got the Pacers and the Hawks. The Sixers against the Celtics. The Warriors against the Nets. And then the Rockets against the Pelicans. Last night, the Cavs became the first team to clinch the postseason. 52-10 on the year. Best record in the NBA right now. You had the Thunder knocking off the Grizzlies 120-103. The Bucks won 137-107 over the Mavs. And yeah, we are getting closer and closer to the postseason. So we are going to take our next break now. And then when we come back, we'll talk about some of the moves regarding defensive players, new deals, and some players got released. So we'll get into all that when we come back from our next break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to now talk about some of the other moves around the NFL, mainly regarding defensive players, and mainly talking about Maxx Crosby. So, there were some questions on whether, Maxx Crosby wanted to stay with the Raiders. Was he committed to the team? He was at Pete Carroll's press conference. And I think that was an early indication on where he stood with the Raiders. And they ended up agreeing to a new deal. He signs a 3-year, $165 million contract. And this also gives him $91.5 million guaranteed, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. I feel like we hear this every year. This deal now makes this player the highest paid player in NFL history, the highest highest non-quarterback in NFL history, or the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. We hear that every single year. But, as the cap goes higher and higher, salaries are also going to go up too. But yeah, Maxx Crosby, this is a key piece to this franchise, and they did not want to lose him. And, I feel like Pete Carroll and this regime, they are going to turn this team around. This team will be competitive with Pete Carroll as the head coach. Now, I don't know how long Pete Carroll is going to be the head coach, but I think it'll make him just being there is going to make an immediate impact. And they had to keep Maxx Crosby because, that defense needs some work. And you would think with Pete Carroll being there that it's going to pay off immediately. And Maxx Crosby, in 6 years with the Raiders, is 59.5 sacks. He's a 2-time second-team All-Pro and a 4-time Pro Bowler. But you could not lose him. You did not want to lose him. And I think if the Raiders would have made a hire that, maybe it was a first-time head coach or something, I think Maxx Crosby probably would have wanted out. But I do think with Pete Carroll, he's buying in. And looking at Maxx Crosby's stats from 2024, more specifically, Maxx Crosby on the season, he had 45 total tackles, 7.5 sacks, and 28 solo tackles. And he played in, I want to see how many games he played in, because he actually did miss some time, I believe, with injury. But the Raiders, they could go a lot of different ways with this draft. I mean, they do have a lot of holes that they need to address. Quarterback position, I think running back is also a position of need as well, but that's something they could do later. But defense, I think, is something that, between free agency and the draft, that's something that'll be addressed. But yeah, Maxx Crosby, for pretty much his whole career, has been durable. Has not missed time, but he did only play in 12 games in 2024. So, you want to hope that he increases that next year. 2023, he had 14.5 sacks. 2022, he had 12.5 sacks. And looking at the Raiders' cap space, just take a quick look at that. So the Raiders currently have $95 million in cap space. And they just cut Gardner Minshew, so that frees up some more cap space as well. So the Raiders, you would think, are going to be big spenders this offseason. They're a team that definitely could afford a DK Metcalf that they were to bring him in. But right now, you look at some of the other contracts. I mean, Christian Wilkins is making a lot of money. I wonder if, I guess they'll keep him around, I would imagine, because he has, he's making a ton of money. And I just looked up Christian Wilkins, and the Sports Illustrated article from almost a day ago says massive Wilkins deal named among worst of 2024. But maybe he bounces back. Because he was brought in to pair up with Maxx Crosby, and it just really did not work out. But I wanted to get into some of the other deals that were made. So along with Maxx Crosby, we also did see the Eagles. They re-signed one of their key players on defense, and that was Zack Baun. And Zack Baun was, you could say, one of the best signings of the offseason. One of the best under the radar signings of the offseason. They re-signed him, and I was saying the Eagles, I think, are going to make it a priority to try to bring him back because he was just such a key player on this defense. And they went out and did it. They bring him back, they re-sign him, and he will be man in the middle of the field next season. And I wanted to get the specifics of the deal, but for some reason Yahoo Sports was not loading for me. So they bring back Zack Baun. It's on a 3-year contract, and the deal is for $51 million. $34 million guaranteed with $1.5 million in incentives. And this is after they agreed to giving Saquon Barkley a new deal. But they only signed Zack Baun. They brought him in on a 1-year, $3.5 million contract. And they really just did not expect him to have the season that he had. They brought him in to be a rotational player and to contribute on special teams. And he did more than do that. And he had an interception in the Super Bowl. He finished the year getting an All-Pro. He had 151 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and 5 forced fumbles. He had 33 tackles and a pair of interceptions in the playoffs. And one of them was obviously in the Super Bowl. And he was a 3rd-round pick for the Saints back in 2020. So he got a big payday, well-deserved for him. Key contributor to that Eagles Super Bowl defense. And then you also had, and I did talk about this, the Cowboys did sign Osa Odighizuwa, their defensive tackle, to a contract. He was a franchise tag candidate, but the Cowboys were able to re-sign him, and they agreed to a 4-year, $80 million contract, $58 million guaranteed, when he was a 3rd-round pick in 2021. And, he started in all 17 games for them. He had career highs in 2024 in sacks and QB hits and tackles. So, that was big getting him back. And you had CeeDee Lamb restructure his deal to open up some more cap space. So, he's an important player on their defense as well. So, getting him back, that was good. But you also had some other moves with teams releasing defensive players. You had the Eagles, they released Darius Slay. You also had the Chargers. They released Joey Bosa after 9 seasons. And the Chargers save over $25 million in cap space. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. A team will definitely pick him up. I mean, there's people talking about him going and playing with his brother in San Francisco with Nick Bosa. That would be quite something, having the Bosa brothers rushing the passer. That might be something the 49ers maybe consider. And then in terms for Darius Slay, I mean, he talked about he either wants to finish his career with Philadelphia or he wants to go back to Detroit. So, we'll see if that ends up happening, if he goes back to Detroit. That would be something. I think the Eagles also are going to release James Bradbury as well. That's also someone that could get cut. But, now they have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean on rookie contracts, so they really don't need him. Oh, yeah, so they did officially. They released James Bradbury. So that secondary from 2022 is pretty much gone. Because C.J. Gardner-Johnson's a free agent, I believe. I don't know if he's coming back. Darius Slay they got rid of. So, yeah, now it's Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. So, but the Eagles, they will, make the necessary replacements. They'll make the necessary moves for those guys. So they'll be all right. They got the young players in the secondary. So, yeah, a lot of moves regarding defensive players. Let me know what you guys think about these moves and the impact of these moves. For the Chargers, it's kind of similar with, the Seahawks and trading Metcalf and getting rid of Tyler Lockett. Jim Harbaugh is changing the team up, putting it in his image. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, those guys, they're from, the previous regimes. So, and also Joey Bosa just makes a lot of money. So, and I think, Harbaugh is going to continue to build this team up. And, maybe, they end up getting a DK Metcalf for the receiving core. Because that is a need for the Chargers as receiver. But, yeah, Joey Bosa, we'll see where he ends up. There'll definitely be a team that picks him up. We'll just have to find out who that ends up being. But let me know what you guys think about what we just talked about all these defensive players, any thoughts you may have. So we're going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we will talk about what teams that made the playoffs last year in baseball will miss the playoffs this year. Who has the best chance of doing that? We'll get into all that when we come back from our next break. So with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the fourth part of the show, we're going to talk about what MLB teams that made the postseason last year have a chance of missing the postseason in 2025. And I think you could look at one division in particular and say, yeah, that's probably not happening again. And that is 3 teams from the American League Central made the playoffs last year. That probably isn't going to happen again. I don't think that will happen again. I think the Tigers are going to be better this year. I like that they brought back Jack Flaherty. Gleyber Torres, interesting move in some ways, but I think that's another bat. Because he did very well in the leadoff spot for the Yankees last year. So I think bringing him in with the guys that you have. I feel like they could be better. but only time will tell. The Guardians, I know they made some trades in the offseason. They traded Andres Jimenez to the Blue Jays. They traded Josh Naylor to the Diamondbacks. So, we'll see, what happens there. Jose Ramirez was not particularly happy about, those moves. But, because looking at, the Guardians and their projected lineup, you got Steven Kwan, you got some young players like Manzardo, or I remember homered in the championship series against the Yankees. They brought back Carlos Santana. That's what I was trying to remember. What did they do at first base? They brought back Carlos Santana, who's an older player, to replace Josh Naylor. You still got Lane Thomas, Will Brennan. You still got Bo Naylor. The rotation, you got Tanner Beebe at the top. Shane Bieber, of course, was hurt last year. I don't believe they're going to have him to start the season. But, this has been the Guardians' division. So we'll see, if they, in recent years. So maybe it's not them. The Royals, I know there's people that have question marks about their lineup and, if they're pitching. Like, is Seth Lugo going to be the same player that he was last season? The same pitcher? Because he was pretty good last year. It's 16-9 with the 3 ERA. I mean, are we going to get the same Seth Lugo? They gave Cole Reagans a new contract. He's a good pitcher. But, it definitely could be a central team. But there's also the possibility that maybe the Houston Astros, with a lot of the changes that have been going on with them, and, injuries as well, could they be a team that misses the playoffs? I mean, it's hard to say that they're not going to make the playoffs. Because I still think, with Altuve, and you still got Yordan Alvarez, you still got Jeremy Pena. I feel like this team could still make it. But, yeah, you lose Bregman, you lose Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker's a big bat in that lineup. So, but you know what? I think they're pitching. We'll see. You got Framber Valdez at the top. Ronel Blanco, who threw that no-hitter last year. You have him. Hunter Brown, but they also traded, Ryan Presley, who's been a staple in that bullpen for a long time. They traded him to the Cubs. You got Josh Hader at the back of the bullpen. So, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting with the Astros. But, you look at the other teams. I think the Rangers are a team that could bounce back and maybe knock them off. Maybe the Mariners lineup actually hits. And, they could take over a playoff spot. It's hard for me to say that the Astros would be a team that misses out. Because that division is still winnable. I saw that, in some of the articles I was looking at, that maybe the Padres could be a team that misses out. The division is better. And they could be maybe looking to sell off pieces. We heard the rumors of Dylan Cease and Michael King possibly being moved. I mean, I think if the Padres are out of it at the deadline, you could see maybe they start to trade off some pieces. But I feel like the Padres are still a team that I see making it. But the Diamondbacks, I see, with their pitching getting back in. I named a bunch of National League teams, or American League teams. What about some National League teams besides the Padres? I mean, I still feel like the Phillies, the Mets, and the Braves, I think I would pencil them all in as playoff teams. With the Central, I mean, maybe the Brewers, they end up being disappointing this year, and, maybe you see the Cubs win that division, or, the Reds with Terry Francona. But the Brewers have kind of, owned the Central in recent years. And, when they traded Corbin Burns last year, I thought, are they going to be the same? But they still made it. They just got, they still got knocked out in the wild card round, though, which didn't surprise me. Actually, when I look at the American League East, the Orioles losing Corbin Burns, that concerns me, but I still think that they're going to be a team that's going to be in the mix with their lineup. I don't want to say they're going to miss the playoffs, but I think they could be a wild card team again. And then I look at the Yankees. Now, this could happen to every team or any team. But you do wonder if guys continue to get hurt, if that's just going to be too much to overcome and they don't make the playoffs. It wouldn't surprise me. Because we saw a couple of years ago what happened when the injuries stacked up, including Aaron Judge getting hurt. They fell apart. Even when Judge came back. And it was just too much to overcome. They missed the playoffs. They go 82-80. And now going into this year, you have Giancarlo Stanton gets hurt. Sorry. Apologize for that. Always happens. At least once. But you have Giancarlo Stanton, who's hurt. Luis Gil's hurt. If the injuries continue to stack up, the Yankees might not have the depth. And you could say the division got better. The Red Sox got better. I know we just talked about the Orioles, but they're not going anywhere. The Blue Jays made some moves this offseason. The Rays always give the Yankees fits. And you just lost Juan Soto. And who's gonna step up and try to at least attempt to replicate some of his production? There's a lot of question marks going into the year with the Yankees. And I think, a lot of the ifs will pan out, kind of like last year. But then there's going to be some that don't. So, yeah, no, I could definitely see a world in which the Yankees just don't make the playoffs because of injuries and maybe, the lineup is not as good or the pitching's not as good as many people would have thought. It's going to be interesting to see. But I think more so, like I said, you look at the Central divisions. The Brewers, I think, could be a team that doesn't make it. And you could see another team take over that division. And then I just don't see 3 American League Central teams making the playoffs. I don't see it happening. Someone's going to miss out. And we'll see, and we got, a few weeks until opening day. And I will do, predictions and, who's going to win what division. I don't want to do anything yet because I want to, take a look at all these teams and then make an assessment afterwards. But I thought this would be a topic to do just because, we did, a couple weeks ago. I forget when, last week or 2 weeks ago. Teams that missed out on the playoffs, what teams will make it this upcoming season. But yeah, no, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think that it's more likely we will see at least one American League Central team make it this time around because you got to win the division. But I don't think you're seeing 3 American League Central teams in the postseason. I don't think it's going to happen. But we'll see. I could be wrong. But let me know what you guys think. What teams do you think that made the playoffs last year have a chance to miss the playoffs this year? And like I said, injuries are always a factor. So, yeah, I got a lot of spring training action today. I'm going to be locked into the Yankees game because Garrett Cole is starting, and also possibly a potential lineup that we could see on opening day, although Trent Grisham is playing, so I don't know. We'll see. But actually, to kind of take a look ahead at March 27th, which is opening day, still nothing's been finalized yet for a lot of teams on who they're going to start. The Brewers are going to be playing the Yankees. They got Freddie Peralta starting, and Garrett Cole's going to start. I mean, they might not have Garrett Cole listed, but he's probably going to start. But, I see Zach Wheeler and Logan Webb and Sandy Alcantara. He's starting for the Marlins. Pablo Lopez, Tariq Skubal will be pitching against the Dodgers. I'm curious to see who the Dodgers end up starting on opening day. I don't believe they made an announcement on that yet. But it is going to be interesting. And I cannot wait for baseball season to be back. Really looking forward to it being back. It's going to be a lot of fun. Got a lot of stuff coming up. Keep saying it. But it is it's a good time to be a sports fan. So we will switch back to football when we come back from our final break of the show. We will talk about the Chicago Bears. We will do a season overview of their 2024 campaign, how it all went, what they have to do to improve their team. Now, they did make some improvements, so we will address those improvements, which we kind of have already, but we'll get into that. And then that will take us right to the very end of the show and get us set for Friday, another week behind us. And, we're getting to the point, at least on the East Coast, where the weather, or the upper, the Northeast. We're getting to a time where the weather is not freezing, which I am looking forward to that. This winter in the Northeast has been brutal. It's been very cold, and I need that warm weather to come back. But then, once we get to the summer, I'm going to be saying, yeah, now I want the weather to cool down a bit. So you can never win, but once we get to like the 40s and the 50s, or 50s weather, that's a perfect weather for me, in my opinion. Is, high 40s, low 50s. It's perfect, in my opinion. So, yeah, sorry I had to bring up the weather. But anyways, when we come back, we'll talk about the Bears, and then I'll take us right to the end of the show. So, for one final time today, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to now talk about the Chicago Bears 2024 season and what they have to do to improve their team. So they went 5-12 on the season. Caleb Williams, in his rookie campaign, 20 touchdowns and 6 picks, 3,500 yards passing. It was inconsistent throughout the year. It did get off to a slow start, but then looked like he started to find it. Although you could say, well, he beat up on the Panthers and beat up on the Jaguars, who were two of the worst teams in football. But then, after that, after a 3-game winning streak, from the end of September to, mid-October, Bears went on a bye. They come out of the bye, and they proceeded to lose how many games in a row here? They proceeded to lose 10 games in a row after that. So they were 4-2. 4-2 going into the bye. And you had to feel good as a Bears fan, somewhat. Caleb Williams is coming off of his best game. This was the international game against Jacksonville. 4 touchdowns, 1 pick Caleb Williams had. DeAndre Swift was running the ball. It looked like the Bears found something. But then they come out of the bye, and they lose that heartbreaker to the Commanders in late October on the Hail Mary, 18-15. Then they got beat up by the Cardinals. They only put up 3 points against the Patriots. And then they got to the brutal part of their schedule. But against their divisional opponents, at least the first time around, because then they got destroyed by the Lions and the Vikings, but then they ended up beating the Packers in Lambeau the final week of the regular season. But they were competitive in their first meetings with their divisional opponents, but then the 49ers, Vikings, and Lions, really beat them up. But if you got to remember though, the Thanksgiving game against the Lions was the final straw for Matt Eberflus. This was it for him. If the Bears didn't have a good year, he was going to be gone, and that's what ended up happening. He ended up getting let go after the Thanksgiving debacle at the end with the clock management, where they just wasted so much time, and they could have tied that game. They could have went into overtime, and who knows what could have happened, but that was the final straw, and the defense kind of just fell apart. Then they lose 6-3 at home in that ugly Thursday night game against the Seahawks. And then, they beat the Packers in Lambeau on that game-winning field goal. Didn't get blocked this time. But yeah, they had they had some heartbreaking losses. You had the overtime loss to the Vikings. You had the Thanksgiving loss, which, bad clock management. The blocked field goal at the end against the Packers the first time. The Hail Mary by the Commanders. And early on in the season, their 2 losses to the Texans and the Colts, they were in those games. They could have won those games. But, yeah, it was definitely a rough first year for the Bears with Caleb Williams. DeAndre Swift, he was decent, 959 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns. The receivers, DJ Moore had 966 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. Keenan Allen had 7. Rome Odunze had 3. Cole Kmet had 4. But the biggest problem with the Bears, well, coaching was an issue, but you also had play calling. They let go of Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator. Changed that up. But the offensive line was the major issue. Caleb Williams was, I believe he turned out to be the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. And one stat that I thought I did save, maybe I didn't save it on here. I might have saved it on my my Instagram account. So I guess maybe I didn't. I thought I had I could have swore that I had something. Oh wait, actually here it is. So Caleb Williams was sacked 68 times in 2024, which is tied for the 3rd most all time, 16 more than any other quarterback in the NFL in 2024. 68 times. Now, you could say that part of the problem was held on to the ball too long. And I would agree. But still, the offensive line was not very good. Now, what the Bears have done, Matt Eberflus is gone, Ben Johnson is in, and I think that offense is going to be very good next year. But they also did add 2 interior offensive linemen, one from the Rams and one from the Chiefs. They got Jonah Jackson. They acquired him and only had to give up a 6th-round pick in this upcoming draft. And then they also acquired Joe Thuney from the Kansas City Chiefs, who's a solid interior offensive lineman who was playing tackle in the Super Bowl. They acquired him for a 2026 4th-round pick. So the Bears are making some good moves. They are trying to protect their quarterback. And don't be surprised if we see them go into this draft and with their first pick they take a tackle. Or they just take an offensive lineman in general. Because the defense is solid. Now, they could maybe take an edge rusher. They want to pair up Montez Sweat with someone. Secondary, you got Jalen Johnson as one of your corners. The Bears, looking at their cap space, they do have a decent amount of cap space. They have they got a little over $50 million in cap space. So they could definitely make some moves. They could definitely restructure some contracts for some guys. I think offensive line is going to be a key area to address. And then, maybe they take an edge rusher. Maybe you take someone in the secondary. But offensive line, I think that's maybe where the Bears end up going. Because you got to protect your own quarterback. And I think Ben Johnson is a good fit for the Bears. This is a job that he wanted. And there's a ton of playmakers on this team. They had a disappointing year. But it was kind of interesting how the defense really just fell apart after they let go of Matt Eberflus. Because Matt Eberflus, that shows he could coach a good defense. And, with the Cowboys, I think, that was a good pickup for them. Because when they got rid of Matt Eberflus, look at some of these scores. 38-13 against the 49ers. 30-12 to the Vikings, 34-17 to the Lions. The final 2 weeks, better showings. The Thursday night game was just ugly. But, look, they go into 2025 saying, hey, we beat the Packers in Lambeau. And maybe that's the start of what's to come. That was the first time that the Bears were ever able to beat the Packers in the Matt LaFleur era. But, this was a team that I expected to be better just because of the talent. But the coaching was definitely a problem, and the offensive line was also a major issue. But I do think Caleb Williams is the guy, and I expect him to put together a very good season in 2025 with Ben Johnson now as his play caller. But it's a very tough division that he plays in. With the Lions, we'll see what the Vikings do at quarterback, but they're still going to be good. The Packers will bounce back. It's the best division in football. I think it's taken the title away from the AFC North. I think the NFC North is the best division in football now. It was shown to us last year. 3 teams making the playoffs. Now, the 3 teams that made the playoffs did not win a playoff game. But I still think it was the best division in football. So, we'll see what the Bears do. There may be some defensive players they could add in free agency. We'll see. But offensive line, I think, is something that they could address in the draft. Now they already are ahead of the game by, making a couple of trades to get some offensive linemen. Now I think maybe, you use your top pick to go and get one. Get a tackle or something. Who's running back, you're set, quarterback, receiver. Maybe you take a receiver in the later rounds. But, I think you're kind of set there. So, actually, running back, not necessarily. Not necessarily. DeAndre Swift, they gave him a contract, but, maybe you draft one, to be behind him. They have Roshan Johnson, but I don't know. We'll see what they could potentially do. But that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to subscribe to our channels. Make sure to check us out wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We'll be back again tomorrow. Make sure to leave a like and comment on the video. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to